Hey guys, is this better? Does this work? Hopefully so. Switch to the phone. Hopefully battery will stay in there. It's gonna make it a little bit more complicated holding a selfie stick. Yes, I own a selfie stick. Don't judge. Alright. It's one of those days, guys. Grieving parents get it, right? You guys get it. So right now we are in my living room, and we're gonna try this to see if the screen works better. My air conditioning is out, so I am hot and sweaty and a mess. So there's no makeup, and my hair is up, and you guys are getting the mom side of me and not the charity side of me. Deal? Okay. I just want to show off. Do you see my shirt? Robin made me with Shane's picture on it. Isn't that sweet? There's more Cherry's pictures in the back. I can't turn around though and hold the stick up, but thank you, Robin. I love my shirt, and it was perfect to wear today. So, I don't know where to start because, you know, I'm used to interviewing other people and talking about other cherubs or having someone interview me. So, me just rambling to the camera is not something rare because I talk to myself all the time. But me talking live and talking about my son is something different for me. So I was 18 years old when I got pregnant with my son. I was married. I married my high school sweetheart in 1999. That was not so uncommon then, and not uncommon at all in rural Virginia where I lived at that particular time. We were young and incredibly stupid to get married so young, but we did, and found ourselves expecting Shane not long after we got married. So we were married about, I guess, 6 months or so, not even a year, when I found out I was pregnant, and had put off going to college to be newlywed for a year. My dream was to go into pediatrics. So if you didn't know that about me, that was my dream. Actually, my original dream as a child was to be the doctor on the space shuttle, because I was obsessed with astronauts and I wanted to be a doctor. But then glasses and fear of heights kind of killed that. So that's where we were when I got pregnant with Shane. We were in the middle of nowhere, Virginia. The county my family still lives in is so small they don't have a stoplight. There's no hospital within the county, so you had to travel at least 30 minutes to get to a hospital. And I was healthy and expected everything to go normally, but immediately after I found out I was pregnant, I started having the same dream every night that my child was born, and I had a little boy, and they cut the cord and he turned blue, and I heard code blue, labor and delivery, over the intercom, and my son was grabbed and whisked away, and I was left on the table screaming, "Where's my baby?" Now, for a 19-year-old, that's a terrifying dream, and I had it every single night for the rest of my pregnancy. And I told the obstetrician that, and no one would believe me. I was told I was a first-time nervous mom. I was young. Everything was fine. My AFP test came back normal. The first ultrasound at 4 months came back normal, but I just knew there was something was wrong. And at 7.5 months, they gave me another ultrasound because I came down with the flu and I was dehydrated and admitted into the hospital. And on the ultrasound, on the sheet, they have to check off certain things like heart and lungs and stomach, and 4 chambers of the heart. It's everything where it's supposed to be, at least for this particular hospital. I'm not really sure if every hospital or every ultrasound tech has to do that. But at this particular hospital, they had a checklist. And the doctor literally wrote down on the list, "Can't find stomach," and never said a word. My obstetrician never said a word. Meanwhile, I'm still telling him I'm having these nightmares, and he's telling me there's nothing wrong, there's nothing wrong. So I went into labor a couple of weeks early on January 28th, 1993. My water broke at home, and we drove to the hospital, and I was in labor 13 hours. I had an epidural, too late because I felt everything at that point, and he was born at 6:50 at night, and most of the staff had already gone home. When he was born, they cut the cord, and he turned blue, and they grabbed him, and the intercom said code blue, labor and delivery, and they left me on the table screaming, "Where's my son?" Exactly like the dream I had for all those months that no one would believe me. It was like having an outer body experience, because I could see myself on the table and hear the words coming out of my mouth and hear myself screaming, but it was like I was watching it happen to someone else. After about, I'm really not sure, maybe 15 or 20 minutes or so, I'd have to actually ask someone else who was there, because I was kind of hysterical at that particular time. My OB came back in and finished delivery and sutures and all that fun stuff that I'm not going to get too graphic about, but I'm screaming on the table, "Where's my baby? What's happened?" And he would not say a word. Wouldn't look up, wouldn't answer a question, wouldn't say a word. At that point, I believe that I threatened to kill him, and then he left, and the anesthesiologist who did my epidural came in, and he's the one who diagnosed Shane, because at almost 7 o'clock at night, there were no pediatricians in the hospital. And anesthesiologists are trained on CDH. It's one of the first things they're taught. So I was lucky, I suppose, that the anesthesiologist remembered that and was able to diagnose Shane. But at that point, they'd already bagged him. They'd already done a lot of things that you shouldn't do with a CDH patient. But the fact that he was still alive was a miracle. So UVA's hospital helicopter was called. Shane was supposed to go to Charlottesville, but their helicopter was broke that night. So Duke came and got him. So 6 hours later, after he was born, they actually had him in an incubator and not intubated at that point. The life flight team from Duke wheeled him in to let me see him and say goodbye to him, and Shane was fully awake. He'd not been sedated. He was just on oxygen at that point, in a pulse ox, and in a room full of people, because at that point I was laying in the recovery room, and my whole family's in the room with me, and I have a really big family, and then Shane's dad's family was in there too. So they wheeled Shane in this little incubator, and he was so tiny. He weighed 6 pounds 9 ounces. He was so tiny, and he looked at me, and he recognized my voice in a room full of people, and he looked straight at me, and he was completely coherent in there, and he looked so good in pink. Not at all like you would think a CDH kid would look like. The life flight nurse Ed from the helicopter explained what CDH was and what would happen. They took pictures of Shane, of the Polaroid, so that I would have pictures of him in case anything happened before I could get there. Shane's dad, Jeremy, and his uncle James drove immediately to North Carolina, and they followed the helicopter. So I was left at the hospital. Everyone else went home. My mom stayed with me overnight, and by 7 o'clock the next morning, I checked myself out against medical orders. There was no way I was staying in that hospital, and I stayed away from my son. So against doctor's advice, and very sore. I had 25 stitches at that point. My dad put me in the back of his pickup truck, and anyone who knows my father knows the man drives like a maniac. And 2 hours later, and even more bruised than I was when I began, we got to Duke, and I got to see Shane again. At that point, he was hooked up to everything. Let me see if I can. So I have his books here, his baby books. I wanted to show you guys pictures, but it's really hard to do with one hand holding up the camera, so bear with me. I don't know if you can see that. This is one of the very first pictures ever taken of him, and you can see all the tubes, and by then he was completely sedated, and on morphine, and God only knows what else then, and he wasn't even 24 hours old. They had him intubated, and they had x-rays, and one of the surgeons came in and explained what CDH was, and this is how we learned about CDH, other than the quick little synopsis the anesthesiologist gave us at the hospital he was born at, and that was a very crudely drawn diagram on a hospital paper towel of what CDH was. So, and not even really what CDH was, but what Shane looked like. So Shane had a full right lung and a third his left lung, which is not bad for a CDH kid. He only had his stomach and some intestines up there, and his liver was down. In the grand scheme of CDH, his case was not that bad. But he was missing most of the diaphragm itself, but he still had a third of that lung, and that's what we saw on that paper towel. So that was it. There was no pamphlet, there was no glossy diagram, there were no statistics, there was no sheet of paper, there was no one to call, there was absolutely nothing and no one to explain what happened next, or who we could turn to, or what CDH was. That was it. That paper towel is all we had. And I was raised Catholic, so my immediate first worry when we didn't know if he would make it or not was, I need him baptized. He's got to get baptized. He has to get baptized. I was scared to death something was going to happen to him. And I don't know what you all believe, but this was my belief, so please respect that. And I married the son of an evangelical Methodist preacher, and when I married him, I was no longer Catholic. So, bless his heart, my ex-father-in-law grabbed what he could and did a very quick dedication ceremony / baptism in the hospital at Shane's bed, because I begged him to. And he did that for me, and I will always be grateful to him for that. And I think I actually have a picture of that. You guys give me a second. Pulling stuff out of books. So that was done 2 to 3 days old, because Shane had surgery on the 3rd day. And that sounds kind of ominous, doesn't it? On the 3rd day, gosh, 1 second, guys. I have scrapbooks and I'm pulling them out, so because I can't hold the book up. So that was Shane right before surgery. I know there's a bit of a glare in here. I'm sorry. And that was me looking very pale at that point. So on the 3rd day, Shane had his first repair. They took Gore-Tex and made him a diaphragm. And we thought he was doing well. And now I also need to tell you that Shane had other birth defects than just CDH. He had an ASD, which is an atrial septal defect, which is a heart defect. He also had a high palate, which is a roof of your mouth that was very high, made it hard for intubation and feeding and that sort of thing. He had some genital defects. He had hypospadias and undescended testes. Not a big deal, but we require surgery. And he also had a pulmonary sequestration. And what this is it's an extra artery that came from his heart to an undeveloped portion of his lung. So that left lung that was squished, it was instead of being like this, it was kind of like this. It was just, I don't even know how to explain it. It was hard and squished. And there's extra blood going down and coming back. So that was putting a strain on his heart. And I need to correct myself. I said that they used Gore-Tex to repair his diaphragm, and they didn't. That was the second repair. The first repair, they used this lung tissue. And Duke is a teaching hospital, so when you have surgery, you sign a waiver that says you do whatever you need to do, and here's my permission. And when you're 19 and you don't know any better, you just sign. So the surgeon used that tissue, that completely unflexible, hardened lung tissue, to use to repair Shane's diaphragm. So that's what was placed in there. And I have yet to this day found one medical journal article where any other child has had that done, or any animal has had that done as part of research experimentation for CDH repair. I've never seen that anywhere else, and I can understand why the surgeon thought that that might be a good idea rather than put a foreign body into Shane. But you know, I would have rather that it been tested before that was done, and it failed. 4 months later, he reherniated, and he never really recovered after that, after the second repair. He was doing good, and then when he reherniated, everything kind of went downhill. He kept getting pneumonia. He got pneumonia 6 times in the hospital, and he got blood infection after blood infection after blood infection. He got 30 of them, and I am not exaggerating. He got 30 different blood infections in the 10 months, and he was in ICU at Duke. So I need to tell you a little bit about Duke's PICU, and this, I'm not slamming Duke at all, you guys. I'm just explaining our experience and sharing our experience. And this was 23 years ago, so you know, a lot's changed since then, and people know better and do better. But at the time, the PICU, the Pediatric Intensive Care Unit at Duke, looked like a scene from MASH. It was bed, and the only thing that separated us was curtains. So if one child got sick, you can be damn sure everybody in that row got sick. If one child got a blood infection, 3 or 4 kids around that kid got a blood infection. And it was constantly trying to fight something all the time. I'm going to back up a little bit. On probably the 3rd or 4th day that Shane was in the ICU, the little boy next to him died. And a week later, the little girl across from him died. And when you're in a room like that, and you see things like that, and there's nothing separating you but a curtain, and you can hear the parents beside you saying goodbye to their child, and you're 19 years old, and you've never been around death, and you've never seen anything like that, and no one prepares you. No one stops you before you walk in that room, and they say, hey, by the way, let me tell you what you're going to see, and what your child's going to look like, and what you may see at other beds around you. No one did that. You just walk in the room, and you're completely overwhelmed with sick and dying children all around you. And a lot of people now call it post-traumatic stress disorder, and I fought agreeing with that for years and years and years, because I don't like labels, and I don't like being a victim, and please don't take that the wrong way. But I just, you know, it literally was like walking into an episode of MASH and seeing all that. And no one should ever see any of that. And hospitals have gotten a lot better now. They have pods with a couple of kids, and they can isolate infections better, and they're a lot more personable to the families and honor privacy better. But at the time, this is what it was. And if you wanted your child to get better, you better suck it up and deal with it, because that's the environment that your child needed to be in. So I just wanted to explain what we were around. It was constantly nurses and doctors and intercoms and crying parents and beeping machines, and it was just, that was our norm. That was life at that particular time. Shane never went on ECMO. ECMO is a heart and lung bypass machine. It stands for extracorporeal membrane oxygenation, and he was prepped for it before his first surgery, and for 2 weeks the machine sat beside us and was ready to go, but he was never hooked up to it. And I, to this day, don't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing, because maybe that was the extra push he needed to fully recover. Maybe it would have taken him sooner, I don't know. But every child around him was on ECMO. I'm very well versed in what it looks like and what it takes to put a kid on and off, and seen more than most parents should ever see. So even though Shane wasn't on ECMO, I kind of feel like I lived that experience with all the multiple children that I saw around us on and off of it for 10 months. So fast forward to 4 months when Shane had his second repair, and this time they used Gore-Tex. And Gore-Tex is the same material that they make rain boots and other outerwear with. It's the same company. So, and it's the same fabric. So you can imagine having that in your body. Well, Shane, when he reherniated and had the second repair at 4 months, and they used Gore-Tex, they took the lung tissue out that they did at first. And when Shane got all those blood infections, the bacteria would colonize on that patch. So that made it extremely hard for him to get better and to not keep having recurrent infections over and over, because that bacteria was on a foreign body that couldn't fight it. And at 4 months old, between the reherniation and all the infections and getting Pseudomonas pneumonia 6 times, he suffered brain damage. And at the time, he was diagnosed with cerebral palsy, because that's kind of a catch-all, your brain's not connecting to your body like it needs to phrase. And so that he was diagnosed with CP. And he was fully ventilator dependent and oxygen dependent, and at the time, what some people would call a vegetable. He was completely out. And they told us that we needed to turn off the machines and let him go. Well, when you're a mom, you know when your child is there and when they're not there, and that mother's intuition outweighs any medical information, because you know. And I knew he was still there, and I knew it wasn't time to let him go. And despite everyone around us, all the doctors, our family thought we were crazy. My ex-husband probably thought I was crazy, but he respected my intuition. We fought. So over the next 6 months, Shane was trached. He was still sedated most of the time. They told us he was blind, and they told us he was deaf. And but we kept trying to get him off the ventilator, and he'd do well, and then he'd have a setback, and then he'd do well again, he'd have another setback. He'd either get pneumonia again, or he'd get another infection, and we were up and down the CDH roller coaster that every CDH parent knows well. 2 steps forward and 10 steps back, and that's where we were at that point. By that summer, we knew that we had to get him home, that he was never going to make it if we kept him in the hospital where he kept getting sick. But living in rural Virginia, taking him home was not an option, because there was no hospital close by, there was no nursing company, no medical equipment company, and there's no way that we could have taken care of him on our own, on a ventilator, and a feeding tube, and oxygen, and pulse ox, and life support at home to 19-year-olds. So we moved to North Carolina. Jeremy got a job, and by October we had the equipment company lined up, we had a house, we had a nursing company lined up. I had gone in front of the ethics committee with the hospital 4 or 5 times. I have those audio tapes somewhere, they're wonderful to listen to, of the doctors telling me to unplug him, and the hospital attorney sitting in on the meeting, and the ethics committee people sitting in on the meeting and telling me that I'm being an awful mother because I'm making this child suffer unnecessarily. It was awful. And I was very shy when Shane was born, as far as talking to people who I thought were above me, such as doctors. I believed everything they said, and I thought they were God, because remember, I wanted to be one of them. I would spend hours in Duke's medical library when the nurses changed shifts and they would kick us out for 4 hours. I would go immediately to the library and look up every single thing about CDH that I could find. Every medication he was on, every complication he had, every infection, everything I could find, and I'd Xerox it, and I'd take it back to his bed, and then I would look up every other word, because it was all in Latin, and I had never taken medical terminology before. So that's what we did for 10 months. The sickness roller coaster, and the trying to prepare to get him home, and trying to figure out what was wrong with him. And the more that I went to the library, and the more that I was learning, the more I was getting on the surgeon's nerves, because I was asking them questions, and I was starting to demand answers from them, and they would tell me something, and I would find out that it wasn't true. Then I was there at that bedside at morning around 6 o'clock, and they knew I wasn't happy, and I got picked up by security twice and removed, and literally picked up out of the room and taken out, because I was not happy with one of the surgeons. No, I'm not going to use some expletives, John, thanks. So And I'm not advocating anyone to do that, but in Shane's case, it was necessary because that's where we were, and we were butting heads. And from their perspective, they had this teenage mom who thought she knew everything. He was going to the library and correcting them on medical information and pestering them and demanding answers and questioning everything they did. And I was a pain in the ass. There you go, John. I was a pain in the ass. And I can see that now. But at the time, I was just sticking up for my son and doing what I thought was right. Meanwhile, the nurses were amazing. The neonatologists were incredible. Shane's primary nurse became his godmother, and if something had happened to us, Rachel would have gotten custody of Shane because she was the only one in the world who knew how to take care of him and loved him like we did. Of course, our families loved him, don't get me wrong, but the medical stuff would have just been too much to ask them to do. And you know, after 10 months, Shane was Rachel's baby, according to her, and loved her dearly for that. And we were spending so much time in the hospital that I was going to dinner with the nurses and hanging out with them on weekends after hours. And when we signed up for home health, half the staff signed up to come with us for second jobs to take care of Shane. That's how close we got. We were so blessed to have so many good people around us. And I'm so grateful to all of them still to this day for everything that they did. And many times they stood up beside me and questioned the doctors and said, nope, that's not right, and risked their jobs. And so grateful to them. 20-something years later, so grateful to them. And all right, so we're going to fast forward to October. I have all those ethics committee meetings. We've got everything lined up, and got a house. And let me tell you how we got a house. So we were 19, and we had no money. 19-year-olds had no money, and we had this incredibly sick kid and had to move and had nowhere to live. So one of the radio stations found out about us, and they said something on air. It's like, hey, there's this baby, and they're trying to get him home. Does anyone have a place to rent? And there was this amazing woman named Jackie who heard our story on the radio and took it upon herself to do a fundraiser and raised enough money for a down payment for a house for us, and then got Jeremy a job at where she worked. So we will never ever be able to thank Jackie enough for all she did, and all the people that rallied around us to do that. That was just, because guys, in 1993 there was no charity to help us or point us or tell us where to go and ask, you know, tell us who to ask for what, or what insurance to apply for, or what help there was. There was nothing. So I really don't know what we would have done if Jackie hadn't come along. She was an absolute angel to us. So the week after Thanksgiving, we took Shane home, and let me see if I can show you guys some pictures. So, sorry, let's pull some stuff out. This was Halloween in the hospital. You guys see that? That was Shane's first Halloween, his little pumpkin. That was my 20th birthday in the hospital with my son, and he was so swollen. That's one of the side effects of surgery with these kids is you know, your body doesn't react very well to being cut up. So after surgery, a baby will swell. That's not something anyone prepared us for either. So when that happened after the first surgery, it was awful because we didn't know what was going on. And he just got bigger and bigger, and it was awful. And so, sorry guys, let me show you something real quick. Well, it's really hard to put this down, but there we go. Just wanted to show you this. Shout out to Jackie. Can you see this? That's a little fun. That's how we raised money. That's the TV crew. We did a television interview as well. So all that from a chicken dinner. Amazing. People just came out of nowhere, and so blessed. And this was the day that we went home, November 29th, 1993. And CDH parents know that's like a second birthday if you get to have this day. Shane went home on a ventilator and a feeding tube, oxygen, a trach. He was blind and he was deaf. We had pulse ox. Let me think what else. He was still pretty swollen at that point, and we had 16-hour-a-day nursing and a home health company, and I think we went home on a Tuesday or a Wednesday. I can't remember, to be honest with you, and got settled in and was doing pretty well, and had all the medications, and he was on an ungodly amount of medications. The kid came home on fentanyl, and if you've never heard of fentanyl, it's stronger than morphine, and we could not get him weaned off before we came home. So Shane was the very first child in the entire country to come home, or to have a fentanyl patch, like a nicotine patch for fentanyl, to wean him off. Seeing your child detox is an awful, awful thing. And it took us 6 months, I suppose. I think, guys, it's been over 20 years, so I mean, my memory's not all that great anymore. But it took us about 6 months, I think, to wean him off of the fentanyl and to finally get rid of all the narcotics. So that was November 29th on a Tuesday or Wednesday. That Saturday, as Shane is home, on a ventilator, beeping, going, running on electricity, and the oxygen tank is, actually, you didn't have tanks. When you're at home and you're not mobile, you have a concentrator, because, you go through a lot of tanks. So a concentrator is something that you can be hooked up all the time. Tank's something to make you mobile. So we were hooked up to the concentrator and all the other equipment, the feeding tubes and the pulse ox and all that. And the power went out, and I was home alone because we were between nursing shifts. And Jeremy had ran to the pharmacy, I think, to get formula or medication. So he wasn't home either, and the power goes out. And my kid's on life support. I about had a heart attack. So when you're on, or then, the ventilators at that point, then, they had an hour or so battery to them. So you could transport on the ventilator with an hour or so battery. So I hooked him up to the oxygen tank, because we're trained on all this long before they let us take us home. We had to stay overnight with Shane at the hospital by ourselves to do all his medical care and learn how to take the ventilator apart and clean it and put it back together and suction him and change his trach and the whole 9 yards. We had to do that before we ever left the hospital, so I don't want you to think that I just suddenly knew how to do it then. I was well trained beforehand. But called the equipment company, and they called the electric company because we were on the emergency list, and someone had hit a transmitter. Does that sound right? One of the things out in the road, been a car accident, and they hit a transmitter. So they promised us to have electricity on as soon as possible, but the guy at the equipment company over the phone talked me into hooking my son up to a boat battery. And you heard that correctly. We had to have a backup boat battery before we could bring him home. And I had to hook his ventilator up to the boat battery to make sure that he could survive the day without electricity until the power company could get it back on. That was a crash course the first week we came home of what life was going to be like for the next few years. And bless his heart, as soon as that man hung up on the phone with me, because this is before cell phones, remember, he rushed over to the house and sat with me until the power came back on, which wasn't that long, but it was enough to give me a heart attack. And that was a welcome home. So that was our first week. And a transformer, thank you, Liz, a transformer, that's what it's called. So that was the end of November. Christmas came, and the kid who was blind, and they told me to unplug him. Let me see if I can pull this out. I'm sorry, guys, it's kind of hard to do. This is that kid with Santa Claus. See him? I'll tell you a story about Santa Claus in a minute. But we decorated the Christmas tree the first week of December, because I always do that the first week of December right after Thanksgiving. And we were so excited to have him home for Christmas. And he started looking at the Christmas tree lights. He started following them. They were blinking, and he would turn his head to the lights, and that's when we knew that he could see. And Shane wasn't born blind. He lost his sight because of the brain damage. So they told us that, you know, he would never see again because it was something wrong with his brain at that point. But they were wrong. So we got a Christmas miracle. And anytime someone tells me they don't believe in miracles or any of that, it's hard for me to understand because I've seen them. And that was just one of the first ones that we got. So that was the first week of Christmas. So the Santa Claus story. Look, you guys, I can talk forever, so you need to shut me up at some point. And we're not even through the first year yet. So Santa Claus. We had a double stroller that, just like a regular double stroller. If you had twins, toddlers, you put one in the front, one in the back. You guys know what I'm talking about? So we got one of those. And on the back seat sat his ventilator. And let me see if I have a picture somewhere, because it was quite the get-up we had going on. We had the ventilator on the back seat. We had Shane in the front seat, because at that point he could sit up a little bit. Well, actually, he was chubby enough to fit in there and not fall over, if you want me to be completely honest. And we had an oxygen tank under him, and then, you know, under the bottom where most people would put their diaper bags, we had oxygen tanks. We had the pulse ox sitting on top of the ventilator. Jeremy was a welder, so he welded a pole to the stroller that would hold the feeding pump and the feeding bag, and that's how we moved around. And let me tell you guys, we were quite a sight. We the looks we got everywhere, but you know, you can't. You have to go back and forth to the hospital. You have doctor's appointments, and we didn't have CDH clinics then, so we were old school. You know, and I know a lot of you still are. You have to see the dietitian on Monday. You come back Tuesday morning to see the pulmonologist. Then you see the surgeon in the afternoon, and then you're back on Thursday to see, I don't know, you know, one of 50 other therapists or doctors, and at this point, we had switched to UNC. So when we left Duke, we switched to UNC, and I should probably tell you why we switched to UNC. Because the surgeons at the time, who were not the surgeons now, so I'm not naming names, and I don't want to insult anyone. The surgeons at the time were so adamant that we were making the wrong choice, and that Shane was a vegetable, and that everything we were doing was just not what we should be doing, that they bet money, they literally bet money, that one surgeon bet he would live 24 hours, one surgeon bet that he would live 2 weeks, and his pulmonologist bet that he would live a year. His pulmonologist won the pool. They didn't realize that the nurses, who were my dear friends at that point, told me about this pool. You ever seen a mother angry? It was bad, guys. It was really, when I found out about that, yeah, it was not good at all. But we beat all of them because Shane lived 6 years. Side note to that, I still see those surgeons when I go to medical conferences, and they have both since apologized. So bedside manner has gotten a lot better in the past 25 years. And, you know, they're human, and they make mistakes, and they thought I was crazy, and I probably was crazy, but I was a mom, and, you know, they were wrong. They were wrong. So, you know, you forgive and you move on, and now we're all good. We have to work together. So, I am the pain in the ass that never went away for almost 25 years. So they deeply regret that bet, let me tell you that. So I was trying to find a picture of Shane in the stroller, and I'm not finding it. So let me see. I have a lot of pictures, guys. I'm really blessed that I have a lot of pictures. And for you new parents, and you parents whose children have not been born yet, let me give you one big piece of advice. take pictures. Take as many pictures as you can possibly take. Don't wait because you want pictures of your child normal without the ventilator tubes, or you don't want to document them in the hospital. Don't wait. With digital cameras, there's no reason that you should not be taking 1,000 pictures, because let me tell you, the ones who don't regret it. And so if I could give you one piece of non-medical advice, to do that. Take a picture every day of everything, of every nurse, every doctor, every piece of medical equipment, every milestone, because you don't know if that's going to be the last picture. All right? So, yeah, I can't find that picture of the stroller guy, sorry. All right, so that was December 1993. Now we're up to January. Shane turned 1 on January 28th. 1994. And when your child is home on a ventilator and oxygen, a feeding tube, and the whole 9 yards, you go to the hospital and you come home. Or you take them to see Santa Claus like Crazy Woman. I didn't tell you that story, did I? Alright, so let me back up one more time. You guys, I ramble and you're going to need to remind me, and I can talk on and on forever. So, we went to the mall and we took Shane to see Santa Claus during a time that we knew that there would not be a lot of kids. That most kids would either be taking naps or they'd be in school and it wouldn't be crowded, and it was during the weekday, so we took him there. And that poor Santa Claus, he was terrified. This kid came rolling up in a stroller with all this medical equipment and these tubes, and I am not lying to you guys, I Lysoled Santa Claus before I let Shane touch him. And poor Santa Claus just stood there stiff and let me place Shane in his arms and let us take a picture, and then it's like, he just looked at me terrified, and we took Shane back, but we got the picture because I didn't know if that was going to be his only Christmas, if that was going to be the only picture of Santa Claus that we could get. And I just needed to do that. So we did, and we got a ton of looks, and we were probably crazy, and honestly, I wouldn't advise doing that because we risked viruses. You know, if there had been a sick kid in that line, we would have been in trouble. And so it's probably a really stupid decision on my behalf, but we did it because, you know, we were still 20 and young and stupid. And so on January 28th, 1994, Shane's first birthday. And I don't know how well you guys can see these pictures. Can you see that? That's Shane and my little niece Mindy. I don't know if Mindy's on here. Mindy's not so little anymore. She's all grown up. And then he was not happy. It was during his nap time, and he was so tired, and he was still on oxygen. You could see the oxygen tank right there, but he was off the vent for a couple hours at a time, so he was doing better. I went so crazy overboard on his first birthday because literally we didn't know if that would be the only one that he had. And his nursery was Precious Moments Angels. Some of you knew that. So I just saw Precious Moments before he was born, and I fell in love with it because I had a miscarriage before Shane, and I saw a little snow globe that had an angel with the baby, and it just stuck in my head, and I love the idea of angels watching over babies, and we did that in the nursery for Shane. And I painted everything by hand because we were kids, we were broke, so everything was made and painted, and but I loved doing that stuff. And then when Cherubs came along and we needed a name for Cherubs, we named Cherubs after 2 babies in the hospital, and I'm going to tell you about those 2 babies in a little bit when I tell you about Cherubs. I'm not excluding them. So Shane's first birthday, you know, he's still on oxygen, so we couldn't have a flame on his cake, so I made one out of construction paper and painted his cake with Precious Moments, and all of our family came, and it was January, and it probably wasn't the smartest thing, again, because of viruses, but that was the first time a lot of our family had seen him at home, and he survived for a year, and we didn't think he would, and we wanted to celebrate, and so we did, and it was an amazing day. It was an amazing day, and Shane put his hands in the cake, even though he really was kind of clueless about it, not into it, and it was really tired, and he was kind of cranky, and the thing about Shane putting his hands in the cake is we had no idea at the time that he had allergies to different foods. He was severely allergic to milk and eggs, and how he didn't go into anaphylactic shock over that with his hands all in that cake with eggs and milk all in it, I don't know. It's a miracle that he didn't. And he even had some of it in his mouth, and he didn't react to it. Hopefully he just got icing. But so when we started to feed him baby food, and he started breaking out to things, and we saw the allergist, that kid was allergic to everything. And then we knew that he was allergic to a lot of adhesives from the bandages and Band-Aids and the lovely pink tape at the hospital and all that stuff that they hold down the feeding tubes. And at that point, he still had a feeding tube. He didn't have a G-tube because I was adamantly against it, which was probably not the right thing, because he was going to eat. In my head, he was not getting a G-tube because he was going to eat. And why I thought that kid was going to eat immediately when he had a trach and a vent and oxygen, I don't know. But in my head, he was going to eat. And so I didn't want to put him through another surgery. 2 years later, I relented, and he got a G-tube and then a Mickey button. And then he started to eat a little bit because he didn't have the tube down his throat. But he also had the trach out at that point. So I'm going to blur through a lot right now. Shane came off the ventilator and oxygen by the time he was 2.5. And he had his trach removed by the time he was 2.5. I have some awesome pictures in a scrapbook here of all the medical equipment leaving the house because we partied. And it was a big deal. And by party, I mean me and Shane in our pajamas jumping up and down the living room kind of party because, you know, we were party animals. It was a big deal because we never thought, well, the doctors never thought that he was going to breathe on his own. So, that was 1995-96 when all the medical equipment was taken out. And then Shane was underweight. He had a feeding tube, but he was walking. He was a happy kid. He was crawling and rolling and interactive and doing really, really good. Let me see if I can find a couple of pictures of him that age. And let's see. So you guys, this is when he still had the trach. You want a really awful 1990s flashback? I found this last night. So can you see this? Yeah, check out that hair, right? And that's Shane's dad, Jeremy. And that's Shane at 2 years old. He was really underweight and looked like a little elf, but he was so happy in this picture. He was happy that whole day, and I love that picture because that's a great memory. So let me see. I'm gonna backtrack and give you guys some other photos. Really wish I could put this phone down so I could show you guys some of the stuff that I took out to show you, but I don't have enough hands. So at that point, I was a stay-at-home mom, and that's what I wanted to do, and was completely happy being Shane's mom. I was going to school a little bit here and there. When he turned 2, I went back to school because I wanted to be a charity leader. And you know what? In 1995 and 96, there was no degree called charity leader. So I was taking medical terminology and office management and kind of this hodgepodge of stuff, trying to figure out what to do. And well, darn, let me see. So completely not organized for this now with one hand. But so I don't know, some of you guys have seen the pictures. I think, Liz, if you're there, if you can pull it from my personal album, the picture of Shane in the fireman's thing, if that's possible. One of you guys can do that. So, being a stay-at-home mom, we did the cookie stuff. We did the coloring stuff and the crafts and the making his Halloween costumes and taking the family pictures at Christmas, and I got to do all that, and I have amazing memories of that and amazing pictures of that, and incredible survivor's guilt for that, because I got to do a lot of things that many, many, many thousands of other CDH parents didn't get to do. And that's one of the reasons I don't tell Shane's story very often, because I'm not in one side or the other. I mean, there are no sides, but I'm not just in one. I kind of straddle the grieving and the survivor, because I've had both. I've been a mom to both. I had Shane for 6.5 years, and I have all those memories and pictures that come with that, and all the survivor's guilt that came with that. And then I have the grieving parent side and the hell that is. And let me tell you, I would rather have the survivor's guilt any day of the week. But so I don't fit into a certain set. But then again, I do understand what most of you have gone through, because I've been there. I say most because some of you have gone through things that I have never even imagined, and I don't know what it's like to transition a child to adulthood with CDH. So there's some things I don't understand, but that I learned through you. So so when Shane was 3 and 4, he was doing really, really well. Okay, thank you, Liz. And we were really blessed. He was really, really happy kid. This is birthday number 4. Can you guys see that? He was my sister-in-law, Teresa, and he put on weight. He was doing really, really well. He was just incredibly happy, funny kid, and he loved Sesame Street, and he loved Big Bird and Elmo, especially. Elmo was new at that time, and we got to do a lot of things with him that a lot of parents didn't get to do, and I'm very, very grateful for that. But I don't share a lot of that. You guys don't see a lot of those things. So I'm going to share some of that with you. So this was with Shane, his first hotel room, and we went to the beach. So this is his first outing at the beach, and his first time at the ocean. I don't know if you can see that. And he hated it, by the way. The kid had so many textile aversions, like most of these kids. He didn't want anything slimy, wet, cold, hot, fuzzy, furry, nothing. Didn't want to touch anything. And he never outgrew that. Occupational therapy was hard for him from the get-go. And feeding therapy, all my adamant, my kid's not getting a G-tube protest, he never ate. He would take a little bit by mouth here or there, but he had the feeding tube his whole life. And you know what? That's okay. I mean, it's not okay. It would have been better for him if he had eaten, but there's nothing I can do about it now. So this was 1997. Can you guys see that? And Shane and I on a roller coaster. He was 4 then. It's one of those little small roller coasters at the state fair. And he had a blast. That's actually one of my best memories of him. So I will try to do better sharing photos and sharing his life a little more with you guys. And because that's his story, and it's not like all the other survivor stories, and it's not like all the other grieving stories, but that's him. And so that's my baby, and I don't share enough of his stories with you. So back to all the medical stuff. So during those 6.5 years, Shane reherniated 6 times. So he had 6 repairs, and him and Brandon and a couple other kids are all tied for world's record for the most CDH repairs still. And I don't encourage anyone to try to beat that record. We can just let that lie as it is. A couple of the repairs involved just sutures, and a couple of the repairs involved Gore-Tex. And and the first repair involved the lung sequestration tissue. And he was in and out of the hospital at least once every 6 months. I think when he was 3 and 4, we had a really good stretch. When he was 5, he did fairly good, but he started losing weight. He had the growth spurt, and he started losing weight, and he started preschool. So he went to the deaf preschool, and he started, getting sick a little bit more often because he was around other kids. So he went to the deaf preschool at 4, and then he was supposed to start kindergarten at the public school, but the public school would not provide a nurse for him, and they would not pay for his nurse to go with him. And at that point, he was still on medications, and he still had a feeding tube, and he had lots of allergies. I mean, if one of the kids had spilled milk on him, he needed epinephrine shot. So he had to have someone with him. And the public school system threw such a fit at all the IEP meetings that I threw up my hands and I said, forget it, I'm homeschooling him, because then I know he'll be safe. That was the wrong decision for us. I mean, I don't regret having that extra time with him, but I lost my temper, and I should have fought harder to make them provide the services that they were legally supposed to provide for him. And I do regret that, because maybe if he had been in school, someone would have seen something that I didn't see because I saw him every day, or he would have had better therapy or more therapy or better services, or school dietitian could have picked up something. And you beat yourself up every single day for the rest of your life at what you could have possibly done to change the outcome when you've lost your child, but the outcome is still the same outcome. But I do have wonderful memories of us, homeschooling and coloring and playing and learning and learning sign language together, and time with him that I wouldn't have had, had he been in school. But at the same time, when he was at the deaf preschool, he did really well around the other kids, the socialization, that sort of stuff. He actually had 2 little girls that would follow him around, and they had a little double bike, the kind where one kid pedals and the other kid's on the back, and the little girls would pedal Shane around. He would just sit there, and ride around with these girls, just chauffeuring around everywhere, and it was awesome. it was awesome. And he loved it, and he I'm gonna show you guys a couple of pictures here. So here's the first day of school. I don't know if you guys can see that. You see it? First day of kindergarten. At the time, my ex-husband and his brother were doing a band. They are both into bluegrass, and James had a bus parked in our backyard, because in North Carolina, bluegrass, who doesn't have a blue bus in the backyard? And I begged Jeremy to go take the bus and drive around the neighborhood and pick up Shane for his first day of school. So I have bus pictures, even though the kid didn't go anywhere but back to our house. So but we have those pictures, and so that is 1998. Shane is 5 and a half at that point, and doing pretty well, and a happy kid, and doing pretty good in school, homeschool, and this is we would take a family vacation to the mountains for a couple of days every year, because it's only a couple of hours away from our house, and dress him up, so it's this little cowboy thing. And I was forever dressing the kids up in costumes. I was one of those really annoying moms that would make clothes for my kid and my husband and me, and we'd all have matching vests because it was the 90s, and Jeremy, God bless him, went along with that. And so we'd have Christmas vests and 4th of July stuff and all sorts of awful things that I would put them through. But we were really lucky that we have all those memories now. So 1999 comes, and Shane is stable, we thought, come January. But I'm going to back up a bit, because I need to tell you guys about charity, because I've told you about Shane, but let me tell you about the charity. So when Shane was in the hospital, I met another wonderful mom who's in chat here, Rhonda, and she had a CDH baby as well, Preston. And Preston was born in December, and Shane was born in January. So Rhonda was my go-to expert for CDH, and she didn't know much more than me. We both knew nothing together. But she was the first person that I met who understood what it was like to be a CDH mom. And we kind of just tried to figure things out on our own together. And we became very good friends very quickly and bonded very quickly. And in in February, another CDH baby arrived, Andrea. And Andrea's mom was young too, younger than me at the time, and a single mom, and had no family and friends with her. And I know her last name, but I don't want to say it because I don't have permission to say it. And I have tried to find her all these years, but I have not. But her daughter's name was Andrea. So mother and daughter, both their names were Andrea. And she lived 3-4 days, Rhonda, not long at all. And she, we told her what we knew about CDH, which was nothing. And so little Andrea passed away fairly quickly. And we were sitting in the waiting room of the hospital, in the little parent room. And also we were all at the Ronald McDonald House together. So I know I hadn't mentioned the Ronald McDonald House, but thank God for the Ronald McDonald House, or else I don't know where we would have lived for 10 months when our son was in the hospital. The friends that we made there and the other kids that we cheered for, I mean, we were all so close. We would babysit the siblings, as if a parent needed to rush to the hospital, and take things back and forth for each other, and hang out in one of the rooms together. And we were family. We were family, all of us. And it didn't matter if their child had cancer or was premature or had CDH. I mean, we were all in it together. And I don't know what I would have done with that Ronald McDonald House, because that's where I got all my support too. So Andrea passed away, and the doctor came out to tell her when we were all in the waiting room together, because that was really the only place that they could talk to parents, and we would all hear everything. There was no privacy there at the time. And Andrea lost it, and another mom went and hugged her, and I got up and I walked out, and I went to the bathroom, and I lost it, because that's the one mom that I couldn't comfort when she needed me. And I'll always regret that. But I knew that Shane could have been next any minute, and I just couldn't. And I always regretted that. And that's one of the things that really pushed me when Chairs was started, to make sure that the grieving parents had the support they needed too. So Cherubs. So me and Rhonda. Preston passed away in February, and that was awful, because we were close, and it was Preston, and he was the other cherub, or the other CDH kid, and I never saw two parents under so much grace as Rhonda and Joe the day Preston died. Told y'all this was not going to be pretty or a professional video, so and I'll never forget that. I'll never forget the day Preston died, and how Rhonda came back and went to the funeral of another baby, of another family that we're really close to, just weeks after Preston died. And I thought, my God, how could this woman do this? I couldn't have done it, and she did it. And that's Rhonda. She's amazing. And 23 years later, here we still are. She's She's my sister. And love you to pieces, Rhonda. So, she was my hero. And still is. And, sorry guys. So, hold on one second. Okay. So, when Cherub started in 1995, I had not a clue what I was doing. Not a clue. And, you know, Rhonda and I are still in touch, and she'd had 2 more beautiful children, and Shane was doing good, and we were all stable, and so I thought, alright, it's time. Someone needs to do something. No one should have to go through what we did. Someone needs to provide information and something, because we had gone everywhere. The medical library, March of Dimes had nothing, not even a brochure explaining what CDH was. They were no help at all at that time. And, you know, no one should have to go through that or go through all that we had to go through just to get basic information on CDH. So literally 2 members, me and Rhonda, a typewriter on my kitchen table, because this is for the internet, not a clue in the world of what we were doing. And went to the library and found out about the laws, and then I just started writing hospitals and saying, hey, I want to start a charity, what do I need to do? And then I started writing other charities for other things where they were more, you know, they'd been established for a while, and asking their presidents, hey, how did you get started? Can you tell me, you know, what I need to do? And then, you know, going to the state and going to the IRS and just trying to fill out the forms. And at that point, 22 at the time. So that's how Cherubs was born. And Cherubs was named after Preston and Andrea. And I know I mentioned the Cherubs in Shane's nursery, and that's coincidence, or maybe been in the back of my mind, because that's been some stuff on the internet. But Cherubs was named for the babies who didn't make it. That 50% who didn't make it. I never wanted Cherubs to be about Shane. I still don't want Cherubs to be about Shane, because Shane was the only baby in that hospital with CDH. You know, Shane's not the only child who's ever died from CDH. It's never been just about him. And so started writing letters, and set up a board, and Shane's surgeon, Leslie Taylor, who was at UNC at the time, agreed to be the vice president, and she gave us our first donation, which was enough to pay for all the postage stamps for all the letters that I was writing, and to pay for our IRS fee to sign up as a charity. And then Shane's nurse, Rachel, came on board as well, and it was learn as we go, trial and error, and it's always been that way with Cherubs, because we were one of the first charities like this for a specific disease. I mean, the charities that I was writing to were charities for disabled kids, Big Blanket Charity, or a charity for, Agent Orange. Just whatever I could find, whatever family-based charities I could find, I was writing to. But disease-specific charities were not common in 1995, and there was no one, whose path we could follow, who could tell me exactly what I needed to do. And when we named Cherubs, that long name, at the time it was Cherubs, the Association of Congenital Diaphragmatic Hernia Research, Advocacy, and Support. And it was advocacy because awareness wasn't a word then. We just wanted to make people know about CDH, and we were advocating for it, so that's what it was. So at the beginning, it was always research and awareness, or advocacy and support. Those 3 legs, that's where we started. And when we started, we didn't know that there was another CDH charity in Holland who had started in 1994. So at the time, we thought we were it. And so we just wrote letters, and we had 2 members to start. And by the end of the first year, I think we had 10. Second year, maybe we had 50. And the first newsletter was Shane's story and information about CDH, and a decent diagram of what CDH was, and medical terminology so that parents could understand. That parent reference guide that many of you got in your tote bags and in your folders, that's kind of the synopsis of what the first newsletter was, with minus Shane's story. That's not in the parent reference guide. But I just wanted parents to have something that could make it easier to understand, instead of having the doctors talk over your head. Because when you're diagnosed, everything goes in one ear and out the other, and that's normal because you're in shock. All you hear is your baby might not make it, and so everything that's said you need repeated later because you can't remember, because it's too much to absorb, and it's terms that you've never heard before. And I wanted parents to have something that they could take with them so they could understand that, so they weren't going to the medical library like I was, and then sitting down with a medical terminology book trying to decipher everything. So that's where that came from and how we started. And parent-to-parent support group, Julie there was a huge help to me those first few years. And Shane's surgeon, Leslie, she was phenomenal support. She really was. And we just grew. And in 1996, I think it was 96. Yeah, 1996 was 20 years ago. Leslie said, hey, the American Pediatric Surgical Association has a conference every year. You can really reach these doctors and tell them about cherubs if you go. And I said, okay, great. Where is it? California. 22 years old. Our budget had like $20 in the charity bank account at that point, and we were going to have to figure out how to get to California. So I started dialing the airlines and different travel agencies, and one of them got tired of me calling and agreed to go to the airline on our behalf and get 2 plane tickets to go to California. The APSA, the Pediatric Surgical Association, had never had a charity there before. We had to beg to go, to be the first charity there, to have a booth with all the other vendors, Gore-Tex and all the formulas and different drugs. They all had tables, so we were going to be there. That we were going to have a booth, and we were going to hand out information. So my sister happened to live in San Diego at the time, so we had a place to stay. And Leslie said, you need a backboard, Dawn. And I said, okay. I'm 22 years old. A backboard to me is high school science fair. And because that's all I had known. And I wish I could find a picture of that. I posted it on the page this past May, because it was 20 years exactly this past May that, hold on guys, I have to plug in the phone before it dies, so let me do that really quickly. I'm going to put the phone down just for a second, sorry. Can you see that? There we go. Okay, there we go, better. So instead of having something really smooth and shiny and professional, like all of the medical care providers who probably each had $50,000 to go to this conference, and we had $50 at that point. We had a wooden backdrop where I had hand calligraphied all of the stuff about the charity and hand glued pictures of all the cherubs that had joined at that point. It was the most unprofessional homemade mom backdrop possible in a Scream support group. But you know what? It was us, and it was the first step, and we got our foot in the door, and people started learning about us, and we met the other doctors and the ones I had been writing to, and quite a few of those doctors, the first letter I wrote to them, they said, what do you need? How can I help? Michael Harrison at UCSF, Jay Wilson in Boston, David Kays, who is still a dear friend to this day. The first letter, they said, what do you need? What do you need? How can I help? And most of them joined our medical advisory board, and they've been with us since day one, and they advocate for these patients like no one else. When you're with a group of people where that's your passion, whether you're a doctor or a charity leader, you bond, and I cannot thank them enough for not treating me as an outsider and not treating me as some crazy mom who wanted to start a charity, but encouraging me and giving me advice and information and helping along the way so that we can help all of you. They are just phenomenal people, and 20 years working with them has been a blessing, and so many of them are starting to retire, and this new group is coming on board, and It's exciting too, and we've made some progress in the past 20 years, but not nearly as much as I would like, as far as, on the medical side. Some big things are coming down the way, and I can answer some of those questions if you guys want to hear about that later, but let me not get sidetracked more than I already have. So we did our first APSA event in 1996, 20 years ago this year. It happened to be in San Diego again this year, so that was pretty cool for the 20th anniversary of that. And we're a lot better now, 20 years. We're a little bit more professional with the backdrop and the glossy stuff and the things that we do and the services that we provide families. And I'm no longer hand doing calligraphy, and I'm doing graphics and everything. But the charity really blew up when the internet came along. And in 1998, when the internet first started coming on, one of Shane's nurses, was very internet savvy and told me about, this new thing. And it's like, yeah, if you're going to do a charity, you should really get on the internet. I had not a clue what he was talking about. But then we got our first computer donated by GSK, GlaxoSmithKline, and they are headquartered here in Raleigh, and the dad of one of the other kids we were in the hospital with, which I need to back up and tell you a story about two other families. So Ron McDonald House was wonderful and amazing, and I'm completely grateful to them. But there was the summer that Shane was born where they were shut down for renovations. And that was just traumatizing to us families who were from out of state and had nowhere to live. I became friends with two families who had little boys in the hospital with heart defects. And those two families took me in for that whole summer. Took me in, let me have their sofa or their guest room. Took me back and forth to the hospital when Jeremy was back in Virginia working. Gave me a place to stay and treated me like family that whole summer. And they're both on this Facebook profile, and I don't have my glasses on. I don't know if they're in this conversation, but Shannon and Eddie and Michelle and Bobby, I don't know what I would have done without you guys. You just complete angels. And both their little boys are doing well and all grown up, by the way, and it's been amazing seeing pictures of them all grown up. But the friends that you make during the worst time of your life, just the kindness in people you never knew existed till you go through something like this is just phenomenal. People who don't even know you or barely know you, just offering their help and their time and their homes and their vehicles and whatever they can. It's just, CDH is an awful, awful monster, but I have seen so much good in humanity because of CDH that I am so grateful for, that it's hard not to be thankful for CDH in a very strange way. So I just didn't want to not, reference those two incredible couples who took me in for that summer when I had no place to live. And the Ron McDonald House was shut down. So if you guys are there, thank you, and I love you all. And so, where was I, guys? Got sidetracked again. My glasses on so I can see you. So 1996, the APSA conference, and then the internet. That's right, the internet came along. So Bobby, Matthew, one of the little boys with the heart problem, his dad was working at GSK, and he got a used computer donated for us, and that was huge for the charity. Because let me tell you guys how I was doing newsletters at that time. I was typing them up on the computer, and then I was cutting letters out of newspapers and magazines and then gluing them onto little pieces of paper so we'd have different fonts, and then going to the copy machine and copying that, and then taking white out and going around the little edges on the copy, and then taking another copy, and then making copies to send out. That was old school, hard newsletter writing, not like today when you type up everything. So that computer was such a huge blessing, even on the internet, just to be able to do newsletters and have them nicer and not have to retype everything 40,000 times every time I made a typo was just amazingly helpful. So so that computer came along, and then the internet came along shortly after, and websites were starting to become a thing, and me and my bright idea, like, we need a website. We got a charity, we need a website. Because I first started off in chat rooms, because that was before websites were a thing. So I was going in chat rooms and trying to find other families and trying to meet other people, and that was a whole crazy adventure if you guys are around for those days. But the main goal was, all right, we're going to get CDH out there on the internet, and then I'm going to find these families, and then we're going to give them information, and they're going to have help. That was my goal. Well, I didn't know a thing about computers, really. I didn't know a thing about websites, and the charity had absolutely no money to hire someone to do a website, and there were very few people that actually had websites, and I didn't know many other charities that had a website, except maybe the really, really big ones. So I taught myself how to code HTML, not having a clue what I was doing, just learning as I went, taught myself graphics, and we were one of the very first charities to have a website online in 1997, and it was awful. It was so bad. Our internet service provider helped me, and our first domain was like a backslash of their domain because it was free and they were donating it. And our graphics were probably, the teddy bear with the rainbows. It was awful, guys. It was god awful. We did have cherubs on it, and it was bad, but it talked about CDH. So when we did that, families, started finding us, and hospitals started finding us. And then we got bigger and bigger, and parents started to join, and then we had chat room meetings once a week or several times a week, and we had listservs. I don't know if you guys know what those are. The listserv is a list of emails, and you send an email out to this listserv, and it goes to everyone on that list. So that quickly pulled everyone together. And by 1999, we had this little website with some information, but we had all these families on these listservs. We had to have 3 separate listservs, like we have the groups on Facebook now. We had the group for everyone to talk, and then we had survivors and non-survivors, because we had too many people, and it was too hard for one group to see the other posting, and that's understandable. And but we were just talking, and everyone got close, and at that point we were one CDH community, and the leaders of most of the charities now across the world, we were all in those listservs together. And those listservs are still there if you guys want to go and read, and you can see, and actually you can go and see the last few years of Shane's life, as I'm talking about him and sharing his story and his life with the other families on the listserv, and you can see all the kids, when they were little, and Sean was little, and Brandon was little, and we were talking about feeding issues when they were 3 and 4, and it's they're still out there. They're up in Yahoo groups, and we were so close. We were really, really so close. Just one community, one working together. That first 10 years was just amazing. And so back to Shane's story. So now we're to 1999, and I was going to school some. I was homeschooling him. I was trying to get online. At that point, I was trying to earn money for the family, and I was learning how to do websites, so I was trying to get that business up off the ground so that I can bring in some income and stay home with Shane, because by then I had trained myself how to do it, and that's where we were. And we had started doing state reps at that time. I think maybe 98. I don't know, Heidi, are you there? Do you remember? It was like 98. I can't remember. Or Tara. So we started to have state reps and international reps, and we had, I don't know, 50, 75 volunteers. We were, pretty active. We didn't have a whole lot of families, maybe 300 or 400, but everyone was active. Everyone was doing things and involved, and we were a team. And so we were growing pretty big. And in January 1999, there was a little boy named Jeremy who passed away in Washington, D.C., and his family was throwing a fundraiser. And many of us had gotten close online, and we said, hey, if you're near here or can get to D.C., let's go to this fundraiser for the hospital, the Children's Hospital in D.C., and meet each other and support this fundraiser in Jeremy's memory, and help raise money to fight CDH at this hospital, and just meet each other. So we did that, and I wish, well, let's see if I can find a picture because I really don't want you guys to see that. Shoot, I don't have those pictures here, sorry. That was the first time that I met Tara, or Barb, or Brenda, or Jen, or so many families. Judy. That was the first CDH get-together ever, in 1999, in that January. And that was the weekend of Shane's birthday. And the families had got together behind my back, which was hard to do because I knew everything that was going on, so I thought. And they did two things. They got together behind my back and they presented me with this crystal trophy of a cherub and a certificate thanking me for putting together the charity, which like made me a complete blubbering mess, which you guys can tell doesn't take much to make me a blubbering mess. But they also threw a surprise birthday party for Shane. And they had a cake and hats, and we were at Judy's house, and it was wonderful. And little did they know that they threw Shane his last birthday party. And it's just so fitting that it was with his cherubs family. And so that was an incredible weekend. And then several of us, we would get together and meet up for weekends in Maryland, and got really, really close, especially Judy and Tara and Barb and I, because of the three boys, Shane and Brandon and Logan. They were close to the same age, and they were like the three cherubs. And I have some great pictures of the three of them together, and Brandon's doing great, and Logan's doing great now, and Barb has since passed away, which still kills me, a couple of years ago. And that's to have other people that understood to get you through. I mean, I started cherubs for everyone else, but you guys have no idea how much help it was to me. Oh, there's Michelle. Michelle, I was just talking about you about 20 minutes ago, about how you took me in that summer. So Michelle just joined. And so, 1999, Shane started losing weight, but you see your child every day, and you don't see the subtle differences in them every day, and it was really hard, to recognize that. And then he started just getting lethargic and not being himself and having a harder time, and he was getting viruses again, and just something wasn't quite right with him. And we went to see Dr. Taylor and get a chest x-ray, because CDH moms, we can read chest x-rays better than we can probably read a magazine. I mean, your kid's lungs, the diaphragm's supposed to be, what's there, what's not there. It doesn't look normal like any other chest x-ray, but your kid's x-ray. And so the minute I saw it, we knew he was re-herniated again, and he was underweight, that growth spurt, and his formula changed, and the dietitian didn't double check to make sure he's getting enough calories, and I didn't double check to make sure he's getting enough calories, because I just assumed that he was, and I should have, but I didn't. And so he went in the hospital to put some weight on, and I posted photos the other day of some of the last pictures I had with Shane, and I don't know, Rhonda, can you pull those from my wall, the other wall, or Liz or one of you guys, of me and my sister and Shane in the hospital, or did I, wherever I post them? If you have a chance, that would be awesome, and post them in here. So Shane was admitted in the hospital the summer of '99, and that's where we spent most of the summer. And Shane and I stayed in the hospital. Jeremy drove back and forth to work, and Cherubs operated out of Shane's hospital room. At that point, we had our first laptop, still on dial-up, and I would plug us into the hospital phone jack so that we could get online, so that we could operate the charity. Because at that point, we were starting to send out, welcome information to all the families and newsletters, and a lot of things going on. We were really active, doing different new services for the families. And we were sitting there all summer, and Leslie's like, you can do a lot of this at home. Shane had a chest tube, and he had a chest tube because on top of the diaphragm ripping again, he developed a 1 in a million complication called a gastropleural fistula. And that means that his body created a tunnel from his stomach to his lung, where stomach bile was going into his lungs, causing pneumonia. So we had to pull that out with the chest tube and antibiotics and get him to heal so that they could do surgery to repair that and the diaphragm. But we had to get calories in him so that he would be stable enough for surgery. And he also had to sit up in a sitting position because the chest tube had to drain. So my poor baby spent the whole summer like that. And then Leslie goes, while we're waiting, there's no point you being here. Why don't you take him home? So we took him home around the first day of September. I couldn't tell you the exact date. We had this little kid recliner that someone had gotten him. So that's what he sat in and slept in all the time because he had to sit up. And we had him in the living room, and he'd watch Sesame Street, and he had his toys, and we were just trying to keep him stable and keep him away from the infections at the hospital. And my desk was in the living room, and I could work on the charity stuff, and he was right there. And September 11th, 1999, actually September 10th, 1999, something in me said, just keep an eye on him. Something just didn't feel right. But there wasn't anything wrong with him. His pulse ox said he was fine. His oxygen levels were fine. He didn't have a fever. He didn't look bad. I just wasn't at peace. But I couldn't call Leslie and say, something's not right. I should have called her and said, something's not right, and brought him in. But, we had just gotten home from the hospital, and I didn't want us to go back, and he seemed fine. There was nothing physically different about him that hadn't been from the day before. And so I stayed up with him all night, and I worked on charity stuff, and I just stayed up with him and watched him all night. And that morning, Jeremy's parents were visiting, and because they lived near Charlotte, so it was quite a 3-hour drive for them, and they were visiting us that day. And I looked at Jeremy and I said, I've got to get some sleep. Could you wake me up in a few hours? So Jeremy and his parents were in there with Shane, and Jeremy woke me up a couple hours later, and he said that, okay, Rhonda, thank you. You can post it on, you can't post it on my wall. I'm sorry. I'll post it on my wall after, thanks. So Jeremy woke me up a couple hours later, and he said Shane's coughing, and he feels like he has something in his throat. And at that point, we had gotten rid of all of those, the bulb syringes you get for babies when you're trying to clean out their noses. We didn't have any more of those because he was 6 and a half. So he says, I'm going to go to the pharmacy, and I'm going to go get a bulb syringe, and, let's see if we can help him get whatever's in his throat and his nose. And I said, okay. Because he didn't have a trach anymore, so I didn't have suction equipment, didn't have any of that stuff anymore, and hadn't had it for several years. And so I said, okay. So he went to the pharmacy, and I woke up, and I went in the living room, and his Shane's grandmother was in there, and Shane just coughing, and he started coughing, and I took him out of the chair, and I sat him up, and sitting in my lap, and was doing chest PT, which for kids with lung issues, you bang on their chest like this, kind of cup your hand, and usually it's on the back or the front, and it loosens up everything that's in the lungs. When you have lung issues, it's very necessary to do that. So I started doing that, thinking, whatever we get out was ever in there, and he looked at me, and he just passed out, and he literally just looked at me, and then it's gone. And I checked his pulse, and I checked his breathing, and he was gone. And I started to do CPR on him because I had done it before. He had coded at home when he was 2 and on the ventilator because nurse didn't hook the ventilator back up right after she let the water trap empty, and he coded, and I had done CPR before. So I knew what I was doing. It had worked, and this time it didn't work. And I'm screaming at Jeremy's mom, call 911. She doesn't know what to tell them because I'm too busy trying to do CPR. Didn't have an ambu bag at that point. That's the bag that you put over baby's face to push lungs in their, to push air in their lungs. Didn't have any of the medical equipment that I really needed anymore, and just kept doing CPR and screaming. Between chest compressions, when I could talk and I wasn't giving him mouth to mouth, I'm screaming to get there, and the ambulance is literally a mile from the house. But Duke is 30 minutes from the house. And so the ambulance crew gets there, they walk in, I'm screaming that he's got CDH and he's got, all these pulmonary issues, he's got the bag, and he's got all this stuff going on, and they were just like, man, we'll handle it. Well, at that point, I really was going to kill someone, and they let me go into the ambulance with them, and they're doing CPR on him, and we could not get to Duke. It was too far. He was down 10 minutes at that point, and so we went to the little hospital that was literally around the corner from the house, and we get in there, and they want to throw me out of the ER. And then I start screaming all the medical things that this kid had, and the doctor said, no, let her stay. So I'm standing in the corner, and there's a phone, and I'm picking the phone up, and I'm calling Leslie, and I'm like, Leslie, this is going on. And Leslie's on the other end of the phone just bawling with me. This is Shane's surgeon. And she's crying with me, and then she's talking to the doctors, and she's telling them what's going on. She's telling them, listen to Dawn, whatever she says to do it. And she's helpless on the other end of the phone, and that's his doctor, and all she can do is trust these people who aren't pediatricians. They're not neonatologists. They've never seen a CDH kid before in their life, but they're doing the best they can. And guys, they did CPR on him for 6 hours before I said no more. And 6 hours, because he still had systolic blood pressure, and they didn't want to give up on him because he was a kid. So while they're doing CPR, I'm standing in the corner, and I call my dad because I couldn't tell my mom what was going on. I called my dad, and I said, get here now. Just get mom. Just get here now. Don't ask me why. Just get here. Because I didn't want them to know everything and have to drive 2 hours. And then I called Judy, and I'm like, Judy, this is going on. I need you to pray. And then Jeremy's parents were there, and we were all praying together and just begging God. And then I just knew it was time. And I looked at Jeremy, and I said, he's gone. I said, it's time. And he goes, I know. And they kept doing CPR long enough to put him in my arms. So the final time his heart beat, he was in my arms. And at that point, we're holding him and we're praying, and so my family starts to arrive, and it's not just my mom and my dad, it's my sisters and my nieces and my nephews and my brothers-in-law, and then Judy's on her way, and they had nowhere to put us because this is a country hospital, and they had one ER, and they needed that room for the next person coming in. So they put us in the waiting room, out where the doors open and people walk into the hospital, and we're out there where people are walking by, and I told them, I want my family to say goodbye. Can you just clean him up and let me have him? And they did. And they were so kind, and they did the best that they possibly could under the circumstances. I mean, we busted in that hospital. They didn't know what to do with us or how to help him, and they were amazing. And so they cleaned Shane up, and they wrapped him in a blanket, and they brought him to me, and we sat in the waiting room, and I'm holding my 6.5-year-old son who's no longer living. And my family is surrounding me, and my nieces and nephews are really young then, and my sister and her husband were military, and they just moved from California, and they were trying to find a house, and they were living with my mom, and there was 5 kids in that house at the time, and the 2 oldest girls couldn't get along. They were fighting all the time. Kirsten was 6, and Nikki was 4, and so I mean that's typical. And so we have all these little kids. The oldest at the time was, I think Clint was 8. So we have all these little kids in this room with my son, who's no longer living, and all they want to know is what happened to Baby Shane, because even though he was older than most of them, it was Baby Shane. He was always Baby Shane, because he didn't do the things that they did. You know, he didn't talk. He did sign language. He didn't run and play with them. He was a baby, you know, in a lot of ways. He was 6.5 years old, but he looked like he was 2.5 in size. So, you know, it was Baby Shane. And this is how warped your sense of humor gets when you've been going through medical hell for years and you've lived in this world that's completely abnormal for most people. We're sitting in the waiting room, and I'm holding Shane, and Kirsten walks up to me, my niece Kirsten, and Kirsten, I'm sorry if you're reading this. Kirsten walks up to me and she goes, "Aunt Dawn, what happened to Baby Shane? What's going on with Baby Shane?" And I said, "Kirsten, you know, Shane's really sick, and he's gonna go live with the angels." And she looks at me, and she's like really deep in thought, and she takes a couple of seconds, and then as serious as she can be, she looks up at me and she goes, "Do you think they'll take Nikki too?" And we are busting laughing in the room in front of everybody with Shane in my arms, and we're all just crying and laughing hysterically. And that's what we needed, you know. That was it's gonna be okay, you know, it's gonna be okay. And told Judy and Tara, Barb, and the core little group who really knew Shane, and we'd all been together. They knew. And Judy got in her car and she drove down immediately. Tara got in her car from Ohio and was at my house within 10 hours. And I will love her for that for the rest of my life. And the hardest thing I ever had to do, other than saying goodbye to my son and my sister later, a few years later, was to tell the Cherub's family that my son had died. Because that was family, you know. He was the kid who overcame all these things and had all these miracles, and he was, you know, the 1 in a million kid who gave hope to the new families, and we were close. We loved each other's children, and we prayed for each other's children, fought for each other's children, and to tell them to have to type out everything I just told all of you, and to have to tell them was so hard, so hard. That email's still on the listserv too, and it was awful. But the Cherub's family picked me up and helped me get through those months. Judy took over the charity immediately. She took over everything, the phone calls, the letters, the emails. Judy just stepped in. She did it all. And she was the charity secretary at the time, so she knew what needed to be done, and she did it. And for months, she did it. And when Shane died, we didn't know what to do, because no one in my family had died for 50 years except my great-grandfather, who had already had his funeral planned out. I had not a clue what to do. We didn't have anywhere to bury him. I'd never dealt with death before. And we were all sitting in we had a little 3-bedroom house, and that night, everyone went back to the house. We had people on the floors and the sofas. Jeremy and I slept in Shane's bed that night, and that was awful. But I didn't want anyone else in his room. I needed to be there. And to leave the hospital without your child, only another grieving parent can understand what that's like. It's hell. And so we're all sitting around the house. My parents, my in-laws, everyone is just descended upon this house. And we're all looking at each other. I don't know what to do. What do we do? How do we make plans? Who do we call? So, we called the funeral home in Virginia because I didn't want to be buried in North Carolina because my family was in Virginia. And Judy had buried Christopher. So, she helped figure out what to do. She told me what to do. And we buried Shane on my parents' property because in the small little the county they lived in, there is no cemetery laws. So my parents took an acre that had an orchard on it, and my dad and my brother and my husband, I don't think Jeremy did it, but cousins or tons of men in the family got together. They pulled all these trees up out of the orchard in a day, and that became the family cemetery. And it is, my parents live on the property, so my mom and my dad take care of my son still. And there were so many people in that church the day we buried Shane that they were literally flowing out of the church. Shane's Uncle David did the service, and it was beautiful. And the worst sound in the world that you can hear is a casket close and know you'll never see your child's face again. So that was awful. And Joanne, who's a dear friend who owned a floral shop, donated flowers and 100 balloons, actually 106 balloons. We didn't have pink, blue, and yellow then. Ribbons weren't a thing. There were no bracelets at the time. There was none of that. All that came later. At the time, I wanted Sesame Street there. I didn't want the girly pink funeral home program, so I did Shane's funeral program myself. And printed it, and everyone helped me fold it. And so Shane's funeral program is this really bright children's thing. And most people may be horrified to see it, but that was my way of doing everything perfect for the last party I would ever throw my son. So, did the programs, and people came in from literally everywhere. I had families that drove up from North Carolina. Shane's nurses came. People I hadn't seen came. Families from Ronald McDonald House I had talked to in years somehow found out. People I went to high school with that I hadn't seen for years showed up. There was so much love for that little boy that there are no words. And at the funeral, the people had flown out of the church, and the funeral procession to the house, to the cemetery, was so long. It was a 20-minute drive, and there were just so many cars. And we get there, and it had been cloudy and drizzly all day, and threatening rain all day. And we pull up to the cemetery, and I am not exaggerating, and anyone who was there, several people in this chat that were there could tell you, when we pulled up and parked at that cemetery, those clouds parted, and the sun came out, and there was not one drop of rain that fell as we were burying him. And we let 100 red, yellow, and blue balloons go for every year that he should have lived, and 6 Sesame Street balloons go for every year that he lived. And my family pulled together, and they did the food at my mom's house, and cousins came in, and aunts, and I will never be able to thank everyone that rallied around me and Jeremy that week. It was just phenomenal. And then we said goodbye to Shane. And he's at my parents' property, like I said. My parents take care of the cemetery. And my mom is the strongest person I know, because she mows the grass at the cemetery. And how strong do you have to be to mow the grass over your grandson's grave? 6 months after Shane died, my grandfather died. And those who know me know that I was closer to my grandfather than my father. And that killed me. I was fine at the Shane's visitation, and I was passing out tissues to everyone else, because that's what I do, until my grandfather walked in the door and I lost it. And his death 6 months later. And then immediately after that, my sister Deborah was diagnosed with cancer. So within 2 years, my mom lost her grandson, her father, and her daughter. And she takes care of the cemetery plots of her grandson and her daughter. And she's the strongest person I've ever met. And she's a saint. And I want to tell other grieving parents it gets better if I'm bawling my eyes out, so I don't know if you're going to believe me, but it does. I can't even tell you the last time I said Shane's story like this. But normally it's not this bad. I miss him every single day. I always will for the rest of my life. He's my only child. He will be my only child. I don't regret a single minute of it. I mean, of course, I would change things if I could. Of course, I second-guess myself. Of course, the guilt and the what-ifs and the should-have-beens, and it's not fair. You know, that I'm human, and that happens, and it wouldn't be human if I didn't question everything. But I can honestly say that, 17 years later, I still haven't hit the anger stage. I never was mad at God. I was just so grateful to have 6.5 years. I wasn't supposed to get a day, but I did. And, what else? I miss him. I'll always miss him. Birthdays and anniversaries are hard, but it's not that heart being ripped out of your body, searing pain that it is the first couple of years. And there's just no words to describe losing a child. It's the worst thing that can happen to you on the face of the planet. There is not a word in the English vocabulary that describes a parent who lost a child. There's widow and widower and orphan. There's nothing for a parent, because it's that bad. And it does get better. I laugh more than I cry, except right now. Honestly, it's not this bad. And I think about him and I smile. I'm just, I'm grateful that I have the job that I have, and that I get to be a part of so many other cherubs' lives, and that I get to watch them grow up, because I see Shane and every one of your kids, and you do me a favor letting me be a part of their lives. And I don't regret it. I feel blessed, and as much as I love my job and as proud as I am to be Cherub's president and founder, I'm more proud to be Shane's mom. He was what I was put on earth to do. He was my greatest accomplishment. So, I'm a mess. I know I'm a mess. but that's his story. And he was a wonderful, happy, funny, kind, give you his toys, smile no matter how bad things got kind of kid. And I was so blessed. And that's his story. So guys, I'm gonna take a minute to go clean this up and blow my nose and get something to drink. Then I'll be back. And if you have any questions, or you want to know anything about Shane, or anything about chairs, or anything about CDH, I'm more than happy to answer any questions you have, because I don't want to terrify any of you parents of survivors. He was a 1 in a million case, 1 in a million. I don't want you to think that this is your future, because it's not, and I pray it's not, and in just 1 in a million chance that it could be. So please don't let his story scare you. That's one of the big reasons I hesitate sharing his story, because I don't want to terrify everyone else. So just give me a minute, and I'll be right back. And if anyone has any questions, anything at all, I'm more than happy to answer. But yeah, let me go blow my nose. All right, I'll be right back. Alright, so I'm back. Trying to read if you guys have any. Sorry, my finger's going in front of the little camera. You guys are really sweet. Thank you. Don't make me cry again, okay? So stop with all the sweet sentiment stuff, because I just got this cleaned up. Alright, I don't see any questions. Alright, so does anyone have any questions? Anything you want to know? And it's hard for me to see the questions as they come in, so bear with me, because it seems to take a while. Alright then. Wow. No questions at all. Okay. Well, you guys, thank you so much for letting me share Shane with you. And sorry couldn't keep it together, but you know, it's hard. Grief is awful. There's nothing pretty about it. And I can't sugarcoat it, so it is what it is. And just know that if you're a parent of a survivor, that you know, his story is very rare, and I don't want to terrify any of you. And you know, if you're a grieving parent, I get it. So if any of you guys need to talk, let me know. So Lauren has a question. Yeah, Heidi, I can keep it real. You know that. So Lauren has a question, and she wants to know if I've heard it being passed through genes. Lauren, CDH sometimes is hereditary. I encourage the charity, like put on my, hold on, I came prepared for this. All right, so I'm out of mom mode. You guys see this official charity hat? Can you see that? Yeah, okay. All right, so the official charity response to this is that if you have a child with CDH, you should see a genetic counselor, whether your child survived or didn't survive. We encourage every single family to see a genetic counselor to find out your particular odds of having CDH. Overall, it is 2%, but every baby is different, so we encourage you to not only see a genetic counselor, but to participate in all the genetic research, the research with DREAMS and Mass General and over Utah, and all that information is on our website. So, or if you want that contact information to participate in any genetic research, let me know. You can shoot me a message. I'll be happy to send that to you. Alexis, no, there is not a genetic test that can tell you which parent carries the gene. We have not identified a specific gene yet. So there is no CDH test that can tell you that, unfortunately. I'm sorry, Brianne. I know it's not fair. I wish I could tell you why some families have been struck with CDH 2 times, 3 times. CDH is probably genetic, but we don't know. That is one of the reasons that we encourage every family to participate in genetic research. It doesn't cost you a dime, and they are wonderful, and now you can do it without blood samples, and more than happy to put any of you in contact with any of the genetic researchers at any time so that you can participate. The more of us that participate, the quicker we're going to find the cause of CDH. And just because you don't know if there was another CDH patient in your family, there could have been generations back. I'm not trying to scare anyone. I'm just saying, don't assume that you know what caused CDH in a family or that it's not genetic, because you really don't know. And none of us actually know until we identify the cause. Anyone else have other questions? Good question, Shelley. Yes, non-survivors can participate in DREAMS if you have a genetic sample from the cherub. If you don't, then as of this time, as far as I know, but let me double check with Julia and Wendy, I don't think you can unless you have a genetic sample. No, they're not doing hair samples yet. They just started doing saliva samples. Which one said that, Brianne? Was that DREAMS? Laura, that depends. If you're talking about having testing done with a genetic counselor at your hospital, you would have to ask them that. As far as the genetic researchers go at DREAMS and Mass General in Utah, honestly, they are so bogged down with so much research data that you will only hear from them if they find something. That could be months, it could be years. But they do contact you and let you know if they see anything irregular in your family's genetic history. Good question, Gail. Yes, they do have some new things going on before birth. That's true, Brianne. Gail, I'll come back to you just one second. Let me finish the genetic stuff. That is true. It is hard to get saliva from a young child. We learned how to do all that at the conference, and yeah, I can imagine that that would be hard. Shelly, you would have to talk to Julia and have her contact the hospital on your behalf to find out there's a sample. That's great, Born. Really glad you guys are part of Dreams. Sorry, guys, my nose is... and my allergies set up from all that crying. All right, so Gail asked me if there was some new medical things, corrective surgery before birth. And some of you heard, if you've been paying attention to all of our posts and everything, and our conferences and everything. So last year in Toronto, we were at the CDH International Conference, and that's where all the researchers go. Families, that's not something for families, that's just for something for researchers. And we were honored to present 2 different pieces of research from our research database, which was a really big deal because we've been working on this for 20 years, and to present alongside the world's best CDH researchers is just phenomenal. I just can't tell you guys what a big deal that is. It's a huge, tremendous deal. And when we were there presenting our research and listening to all the other research, CHOP announced research that was so phenomenally over-the-top, sci-fi amazing that all the other surgeons and researchers hushed across this big room. And of course, Dr. Cave broke the silence with a joke that was great. But so what they are doing is they have invented a placental pod, and it is not being used on children yet, but it is being used on lambs currently. And what is involved is an artificial pod, just like a sci-fi movie, exactly how it sounds that I'm saying. And a baby is placed in there, very early on, and surrounded by artificial amniotic fluid, hooked up to a smaller version of an ECMO machine, repaired, allowed to heal in that environment, and then delivered as if they were delivered by a C-section. Does that make sense? CHOP has released some information on that. I believe there were some things on their Facebook page. That is their news to tell the families. They've already posted it, which is why I'm telling all of you. But I will see if I can find that article and share it again. Hi, Donna. Dr. Yang is still involved with CDH. He's still around, actually. He's on my Facebook profile. Dr. Yang, if you're here, say hi. Alright, Brianne, we will definitely be praying for Kinsley on the 27th. It's outside the mom, Jessica. Sorry, I'm trying to catch up with you guys. Therese, you would have to talk directly to Dreams to ask them if you're in their registry. There's no way that I have any way of knowing that. I can't tell you that. They would have to tell you that. He's moved around, Shelley. It has been successful so far on the lamb. They're not in the human trials yet, so we're really excited to see that what comes about that. But that's a couple of years down the road, guys. So just FYI. Same question as Jessica. I'm not sure which question you're asking, Rhonda. Is it inside or outside the mom? it's outside the mom. The baby is taken from the mom and put into the pod. I say pod. I know that there's a much better term that CHOP has for it, but it looks like a pod. It's outside the mom. Brianne, you're preaching to the choir. Yeah. It bothers all of us how uneducated most non-CDH experts are about CDH. It's amazing how many pediatricians have not a clue what CDH is. But you know what? It's our job to inform them. Shelly, I agree. Gab is doing amazing work in Utah with genetic research as well, and she's also working with Dreams and Mass General. They all work together. They all share grants together. They all share samples. They all share information. The genetic researchers work so incredibly well together, so they're not duplicating work, and so that we can find the cause faster. It's amazing. Liz, somewhat is no longer a balloon. It's kind of a plug, and they do use those in the worst cases, but very, very few, and only a couple of hospitals are still doing that. Alright, so, you guys, we have these conference next year in Salt Lake City in July, and we'll be posting about that soon, and then you'll be able to not only meet the researchers, but tour the lab out there at Utah and see some genetic research firsthand. Gab will be there, Julia from Dreams, hopefully we'll get Mass General there. That's a really good question, Shelly. That's a really good question. Sorry guys, you guys are going so fast. Madison and Alicia, I completely agree with you. It's very irritating to have to explain to doctors what CDH is and pediatricians what CDH is when, everyone knows cystic fibrosis and spina bifida is. So at the same occurrence rate, they should know what CDH is, but they don't. And it's our job to teach them, and it's our job to raise awareness. So we need all to work better together to do that. Is a big group to, so take some of our information to your doctors and, push them to participate in CDH stuff locally. And, that's our responsibility because no one else is going to do it but us. And finding a good pediatrician, yes, is very hard. And actually, if you guys are looking for a pediatrician, my advice is to ask in the Facebook group, or ask on our forums and see if there's another local family with a chair who already has a pediatrician, because at least then the doctor knows what you're talking about. Heidi, we don't have dates for the Utah conference yet, but we will be posting them by next week. Alexis, they keep the genetic samples on file because if another gene is found, they want to be able to have that sample so that they can test it for other genes. Does that make sense? They don't destroy the samples. They keep them around. Donna, environmental factors, no, there really has not been anything that I can find. So guys, a really interesting thing, so Donna Easley and I grew up in the same area and knew each other as children. She was really good friends with my cousin, and we We played on the same streets in Hampton, Virginia, and played together, and they were spraying for mosquitoes, and we were there every summer, and we knew each other, and years later, you know, we found out that we both had CDH children, and you know, her Cherub and Shane, their medical histories are so incredibly alike, it's eerie. So that has always been something that Donna and I have wondered about, you know, that environmental factors, us as kids playing out there as they were spraying for mosquitoes, and we both had children whose medical histories are so similar that it's just, I mean, it's, yeah. And Alex and Shane are so much alike. But Alex is going to have a different outcome than Shane. I didn't know that, Rhonda. Alright guys, so I've been talking for 2.5 hours and I'm emotionally drained. So I'm going to wrap it up, if that's okay with you guys. That was a lot harder than I expected it to be. I really didn't think I'd cry in there, and then you guys had me a mess. So I just want to say thank you for letting me share Shane's story. Please continue the conversation in the Facebook group. I will be in there, and you can keep asking questions, and the rest of the charity leaders will be in there, and we'll all help, and we'll all talk, and I love all of you, and I'm so grateful to know each and every one of you, and thank you for remembering my son, and thank you for letting me talk about him, and please know that we're all in this together, and